welcome to my video. I'm so excited for today where I'm going to be interviewing Hunter, who is one of the owners of West 7th Wool here in Fort Worth, Texas. He's actually going to walk me through his professional yarn dyeing process, and we get to follow along and see how it's done. So Hunter, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here.
Of course, thank you for doing this.
So how long have you been dyeing yarn?
Okay, so I've been dyeing yarn for a couple of years now. We have been operational as a shop for just over 7 years.
Wow, okay. So has your way of dyeing yarn evolved over time, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a certain method and approach, as you can imagine, but I think really ultimately it does come down to artistic interpretation of whatever you think you can best express. When it comes to it, there's only so many different ways you can dye yarn. There's only so many different colors out there. So, you know, it is what it is. So it's always kind of the challenge of, okay, what can I do that is not potentially otherwise found? We use acid dyes. We use dyes from Dharma, Prochem, and Ashford. They're all fantastic. Every once in a while we run into some that are a little bit mischievous or troublesome. Sometimes they get put in timeout. I don't know. I like them all, but I really do. I do favor Prochem at times.
Why?
Just some of the colors are a little bit more interesting to me. Like they have a burnt orange. I really like the slate blue.
Ooh, yep. Okay, both those colors are definite favorites of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely get that. I've heard that red can be difficult. Is that true?
It depends on which one you use, but yes, there can be a little bit more of a tendency for bleeding with some of the more vibrant reds.
Gotcha.
So yeah, and that's part of our process is after the yarn has been dyed and the cook has been completed. One, you need to make sure the water in the pan is clear. If it's not, then stick it back in. But then two, when we do the washout process and we run buckets of water that we put the yarn in to make sure that everything runs clear. If we're having bleed issues in the buckets, then again we're going to need to resolve that because we do not want things heading out the door that has potential bleed issues. So sometimes I can get like obnoxiously complex with some of these variegated speckle yarns that I do because it's like does it need all this? No, but do I want it? Yes. So whenever you're mixing dye, of course you're going to want gloves on. Also, equally or more importantly, is you want to be wearing a respirator.
Oh, okay.
Because these are very fine particulates. If they go in the lungs, they are not coming back out.
Oh, okay.
You want to be careful. Standing at a distance, you'll be fine. When you're like right up in it though, you want a respirator.
Okay.
So the next thing we do is we're going to go ahead and get water in pans. Depending on the recipe, it's going to change how much water we need. It's going to change, do we put the dye in first or do we add the binding agent, citric acid or vinegar or whatever, first? It just kind of depends on how we want the color to go. If we want the colors to strike faster, you put that binding agent in earlier. If you want it to be more of a tonal chill, then you maybe add it a little bit later. You're going to see an example of that here soon.
Oh, great.
So with this recipe, we put the dye in first and then the yarn. And then when I put the yarn in, I'll put it in and flip it. You'll see everything. And then I'll add citric acid solution at the end. So yeah, let's go ahead and put the dye in. Okay, and then let's go with the yarn. So the yarn has been sitting in buckets of water to just kind of like absorb the water and get ready to go. You want it in at least like 30 minutes. It's probably been in closer to an hour here, so it's definitely ready to go. And we'll do 3 to a pan because that is my personal preference.
You're really draining that water out.
Exactly. You want it to be like saturated, but at the same time not like soaking wet. So go ahead and put it in. We put it in and we immediately want to get it saturated, right? And then, you want to you always want to kind of massage the yarn to make sure that there are no pockets of unsaturated yarn where the dye is not getting absorbed. So you just give it a little massage, and then I'll also quickly give it a flip. And when I flip it, I'm making a mess, I also move where the ring is because I don't want anything underneath where the ring was to not absorb the dye.
And then these just sit.
Yeah, they basically, as soon as I get done with these, I'm going to need to add the citric acid solution to encourage the binding process, and then they're going in there, and they will sit in there for about 4 hours.
Oh wow, so they don't soak you don't just let them soak.
No, as soon as they're good to go with the citric acid, then I'll just stick them in the warming cabinet. Like when I'm cooking on cooktop, that's going to be different. That's going to be, you want it to be at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, all that jazz. Okay, so these are good to go. So this is my citric acid solution that's pre-made. So this is an example of just a very straightforward tonal color.
One color.
It's like, I can just like knock these out, and then if I'm needed out front, then I can knock these out, stick them in the warming cabinet, and then just move on with whatever else I need to do. So it's helpful for that. It's nice that we have a combination of colors that are more hands-on and hands-off, so I can kind of pick and choose depending on the day what to work on. Okay, and that is good to go, my friends. And it's just that easy.
Nice.
Unless it's not.
So we don't need this one to be super hot or warm.
Not right away. I mean, it's going to get there. And you don't need to like necessarily like, you understand that it's a process. You don't need to like, sometimes if I want the color to strike super fast like that, sometimes I'll crank the temperature. For the vast majority of everything though, I'll just let it come up gradually. I hope I'm not Bob Rossing too hard over here. Awesome. So this I kind of apply on a diagonal. You don't want to get too super saturated. So I just kind of like plunge and apply like this. And you got to be careful with the plungers too, because it could be like, it could look like you're not applying too much color until you flip it. It's like, oh, well, it went all the way down through to the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
So you do that, and then we're going to come adjacent to it. And then if we get a little too drippy and we're like, oh, we don't like that, we can just kind of like mix it around a little bit. It'll strike fairly fast, but we've got some wiggle room.
Ooh, color number 3. There's still quite a lot of that natural color in there.
It is. And I may not necessarily be done, because the next thing we're going to look at is we're going to see what our recipe tells us. I'm going to do 3 passes. I'm going to do the initial pass, I'm going to flip it and do a second pass, and then I'm going to invert and do a third and final pass, and then we're going to pull some of the water out and apply speckles. And what that tells me is because, so we initially started off with about 1.5 cups of these 2 colors and 1 cup of this. So that means for each pass, I want to use about 1/2 cup of these 2 and maybe 1/3 cup of the brown. So I will know I'm not done until we get about to that level, right?
Right.
So let's keep going. The goal here is, because I'm working off of all these recipes, the point is the way that everybody has a different approach, the way that we approach this, and the way that I think a lot of people do in order to achieve consistency is the recipe, whatever you mix up, you exhaust completely. That's how you keep it consistent. I can't just use like some of it and then dump the rest, because 1, I don't want to be dumping a bunch of dye down this thing, but 2, I can't achieve consistency unless I make everything as repeatable as possible, which means whatever I write down that I mix, I use it all. And you also want to like focus on, make sure you get on the edges. Sometimes it's easy to be like, to overlook that. Now we're approaching the stage where we need to speckle. So what I'm going to do now is pull some of the water out and bunch up the yarn. And then once it's at a temperature I deem correct, I can go ahead and start speckling.
I can't believe the water is that clear.
Uh-huh.
After you just dumped all that coloring dye in there.
I'm telling you, it's the process between the binding and agent and the heat. It's what does the job. It's how you get it to stick and not bleed. But some colors behave differently from others. There have definitely been some colors that just misbehave. And I've got a whole row on my where we keep our dye of yarn that basically has been put into timeout because it misbehaves. I'm going to go ahead and start the speckle process. Like I mentioned, I want my respirator on for this. You do not want to be breathing this in. Anybody who's doing this at home, working with these acid dyes from these various manufacturers, you want a mask on. If not a respirator, at least an N95 or better. Okay. Let's go. Now I use a pinch method. You could use like a salt shaker or something if you prefer. For something like this, I'll do like 2 or 3 passes on each side.
How hot is that going to be right now?
It's about 160. Okay, that's looking pretty good on saturation. I think I'll just do 2 passes. And you have to be mindful as well. It may look crazy saturated in the pan all bunched up, but once you get it out, it will not be as saturated. So just have that in the back of your mind too. But with that said, I think I'm pretty happy with this. So we'll take our citric acid solution. You want to give it a good spray, but don't overdo it. Done.
Done.
And then we'll head up the other one.
The speckles. And they didn't really bleed.
Exactly. Look at that. That's pretty good.
Test?
That's pretty good, yeah.
So what are we looking for with that?
Basically, we want the paper towel to be relatively clear or to perfectly clear. Again, artistic interpretation, but when you're doing a speckle, you want the speckles to set. You give it time, and you want that paper towel to just be fairly clear. You want those speckles on the yarn and not going anywhere.
Cool.
Usually, it can take as little as 10 minutes, but I like to wait 15 just to give it a little extra time.
All right, so we're flipping now?
Yeah, we're going to go ahead and pull, well, we'll go ahead and flip this one and then pull the other pan lid and do the other one as well so I can speckle both at the same time.
Gotcha.
I'm just doing a clean turn like that. And what you want to do is look at how you don't see any speckles. You just want it to be cleaned where you just get the entirety of the other side as much as possible without overlap, without things flipping over. See, there's a little right there, but that's it. So flip again. Look it up. Nope, see? You don't want that. Flip. And oftentimes when you're like dyeing yarn, you need to be mindful that everything is moving so that you're getting as much coverage as reasonably possible. That's what we want. And it's especially important when you're like dyeing solids or tonals and you want like that just vibrant coverage that you cover as much space as possible. So you just need to, when you're doing the flip, you just need to get as much yarn as possible that has not been hit by color yet exposed so that you can get the other side. And then you do the inverse and you just, again, just look for any spots that need a little extra attention and you place that where it can get that attention. Nothing's coming up on the paper towel, which means the speckles are set, which means I can go ahead and set timers for 30 minutes.
And then what are they going to do over 30 minutes? Just bake?
Yeah. And then when the timers go off, they'll shut themselves off, and then we can start the cool down process.
So what are we doing now? These just finished doing their bake?
These just finished cooking. The warmers turned themselves off because we had them on timers. So we can go ahead and move these over here and get a fan on them and start the cooling process.
Cooling.
You know, there are different modes of thought. You know, do you let them naturally cool off? Do you take the lid off or leave the lid on? We're like, you know what? Once the dye process is done, once that water is clear, let's get cool and let's get going. we got stuff to do.
For sure. Oh, it's so pretty.
Isn't that nice?
That's so pretty.
And the wire's clear like you like.
And then how long do you predict they cool for?
Okay, so it depends on how much water's in the pan, but these are fairly low immersion. Since I had to pull some water out to get the speckling done, 20 minutes, maybe 30 on the outside. And the ones you gotta watch out for is like some of the higher immersion ones that go in the warming cabinet that I do can have as much as like 20, 24 cups of water plus whatever dye goes in. So those take forever to cool down unless I start pulling water out.
Gotcha.
So these will be pretty quick.
Ooh, that purple really pops.
Yeah. And as you can see, the bucket is clear over here, which means that the dye has done its job. And then we'll go ahead and just plop it in the spinner. The key is making sure everything's balanced. So I put these in on this side, so now I'll come around here and put these in on this side to kind of keep things balanced. I'll put this on top to make sure everything stays in place. But I'll usually just wait till it's kind of doing the drippy thing, and then I feel like that's a pretty good place. And again, what we ultimately want is for the water in this pan to be really clear, and we achieve that. All right,
wow.
So pull the yarn. And they can be kind of like bunched up and a little unkempt at this point. So at this point, we like to just kind of like pop them out, make sure everything is just kind of behaving and not scrunched up or bunched up. They're still damp, but they're a lot better than they were just a few minutes ago. And it's at this stage that you can really more accurately get, you can tell like how it's ultimately going to look. And I'm feeling good about this batch. We can go ahead and transition them over into our dryer, which will do the rest of the job of getting them dry. So we don't want to overcrowd them too much, so we'll do like 3 to a, what would you call this? Hook?
Yeah, hook, hanger.
There you go. And there they go.
And then when they're done, what would you do after you were done popping them out?
Right, so after they're done in here, we'll pull them over here, and then on the following day, those extra ties that we tied onto them when prepping them, these right here, we'll cut those. There should be 3 of them. And then after that's done, we'll take them over here and skein them up with our skater, and then label them, and then they're done.
How cool.